Over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day to find our long forgotten gold. The pines were roaring on the high, the winds were moaning in the night, the fire was red, its flaming spread, the trees like torches blaze with light. This will never end, 'cause I want more. Oh, give me more, give me more. This will never end, 'cause I want more. Oh, give me more, give me more. If I had a heart, I could love you. If I had a voice, I'd sing. After the night when I wake up, I'll see what tomorrow brings. If I had a voice, I'd sing. Dangling feet from window frame, will I ever reach the floor? More, give me more, give me more. Crushed and filled with all I found, underneath and inside, just to come around. More, give me more, give me more. If I had a voice, I'd sing.
All right. Here we are.
Hey, hey. Oh boy, it's that time again, huh?
I feel
Don't-
like I need like a Viking helmet after those songs we were just playing.
Seriously. It's like, where's my battle axe? I'm going to go raid some village somewhere.
I thought something different tonight would be good, and
Yeah, it's good stuff.
I like Malcolm McGinnis, so Colin McGinnis. So
Yeah. Well, welcome in, guys. Welcome back to Wednesday night, your friendly neighborhood update log. I'm Rob, your host, and with me, as always, are Matt and Greg, my two co-hosts, and knuckleheads. Although I think the three of us classify as a trio of knuckleheads these days.
I was thinking like good cop, bad cop. I mean, okay, Knucklehead works.
I mean that actually fits a lot better. So let's see. How you guys doing? How you guys doing tonight?
Fantastic.
Doing good. At this point, practically graduated from college, just waiting on the diploma to get sent to me. So I'm excited for that very much.
Yes, that's right. Before we continue, let's congratulate Matt on getting his bachelor's degree in game design. It's been a long journey for him. Although honestly, it didn't sound like it was too hard for you to do that.
It had its challenging bits to be sure, but I think it just is just a statement of the curriculum I was in just actually fitting me quite well, that I was able to kind of get through it pretty. I don't want to say easily, but
I mean, you
I was
worked
able to
hard.
get through it competently. I'll say.
Yeah, you worked hard. You worked hard, man.
Yeah.
Congratulations, nerd. I mean, Killer Teacup is right.
He's got you pegged, man.
He is a nerd indeed.
I don't deny it. I wear it with I wear that title with honor.
Wear it with pride. Absolutely.
Definitely.
Awesome.
But yeah, so tonight we are talking about a topic that we have discussed at various points in previous episodes, but I think tonight we're going to focus on it a bit more, especially given some of the games that have been coming out lately, things like Starfield, though I have not played that yet, Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty, Baldur's Gate 3, and the reason why I'm naming off a lot of these games is because they have one very crucial thing in common: player choice and agency. And in games, okay, this is going to be a little controversial, and it's my own opinion. In good games, giving players agency, in meaningful agency, only enhances the narrative of your story, and by as a byproduct enhances the game itself. I can't tell you how many times I've played a game where it felt flat just because I felt like I was kind of a bystander, just kind of moving through the world. So yeah, player choice, player agency in games. So
What? Go ahead.
Now, I think one thing to kind of distinguish when it comes to player choice is whether we're talking from purely a narrative perspective, or a kind of just a more general perspective, even when it comes to like the mechanics of a game. Because Diablo 4, I've heard some criticisms of Diablo 4 compared to the past Diablo titles. I've heard story is fairly lackluster. But when it comes to player choice, if you talk about it in a more mechanical sense for the mechanics of a game, that could be something like, say you're playing a fighting game. You have the choice to attack high, attack low, block, or jump, or do whatever. Each of those is a choice, and that each of those has a distinct effect on the game, thus making it a meaningful choice, as they're called. But the narrative choice, I think, what more we're probably going to be honing in on in this podcast is pretty much, revolves a lot about, like dialogue trees, or making a decision or action in a game that changes the direction of the story somewhat.
Yeah. Yeah. Even though I will, based on your clarification there, Matt, I will argue even mechanical decisions within a game are important. And the reason why I feel like even both sides of those coins are important is because again it leads to player agency, um, but it also adds to the overall world that we as game developers try to build. I mean, everything from UI, design choices to how the character moves in the world space, all of that. I think all of that matters. But yes, we
Yeah,
are going to be focusing on narrative choices uh, for the purposes of storytelling and telling a compelling story.
But that's the challenge when it comes to especially the video game industry is making story that is really not just like read to you type of story, but making story that you can engage in and that your choices can be engaged in that story. Because you have things like limited dialogue options, you know what I mean? There's a definite cadence and a path that you follow. So
yeah.
hugely challenging when it comes to video games.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because like in a TTRPG, the GM can just improv anything on the spot according to what the players do. But like in a video game, every choice and every effect of every choice has to be baked in. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they're so like they have to pretty much create each of those choices, decide how big an impact each one has, and how different things can end up because of that. Because
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people trying to make games have, with like branching story paths, have probably hit a level of scope creep at some point when
It's
they
out
wanted
of this
like
world.
so many things to have so many differences in the overall story, and then all of a sudden they have like a million different paths, and they're like, uh,
What do we do?
I need to reel this back a bit because I cannot realistically do all of that. It's definitely an art form trying to find the right number to have and how like the depth of like just how much is different according based on those choices.
And we definitely need to address this from both sides. The video game piece is the most obvious to address it from, but we also need to talk about it from the TTRPG.
Yeah.
Because although it may not on the surface seem like, the player choice or the choices are that big of a deal. Anybody who's ever ran any game before has probably experienced that moment where all the planning that you did, the story that you created for your players and all the planning you did, they decide to go left instead of right. And suddenly there you are looking out over the void.
Yeah,
Like, oh,
all those plans just went straight out the
Yeah.
window.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can tell you from experience. See, I DM for these two chuckleheads over here, and oftentimes I'm like, I look at my notebook. I'm like, you know what? Just fuck that.
what do you mean? I'm easy to DM for.
No,
Simple.
it's funny
Fuck
because
that.
I remember like years ago I used to watch some other people play D&D on Twitch, and I remember like after they finished a certain story beat, the DM just kind of like talked to everyone and talked about like what a pain it was when the players ruined his entire campaign arc because they broke a certain item. So he's like, "Yeah, the entire campaign you guys just went on, I had to throw it out the window and to do something else." And it was just funny listening to him gripe about that
Yep.
because yeah, sometimes it happens, and yeah, like, and that's why the GMs, it's. I mean, that's even the choice for the GMs there, whether they
Mhm.
find some way to try to railroad things back on track, or if they just let things go as in and just improv, go off road, and try
And
to
just
make the best of the situation that they
Yeah.
can.
And here's the thing, and that is a term that you just used there, Matt. And let me actually rewind. So for those who don't know what scope creep is essentially when you're building anything. I mean, this happens in software development, game development, any kind of creative
Any
piece.
yeah,
Basically, when the size of whatever you're trying to create expands way too rapidly, too quickly. And before long you started with this little idea, and you turn around and you have this whole big thing that you can't possibly get done within the time frame. So, and there's another aspect to this, especially primarily in video games, but it applies to TTRPGs as well, called feature creep. It's kind of the same principle, but just relating to in-game features or systems when you're talking about TTRPGs.
I gotta tell a little story here, based on what Killer Teacup just said, because and you guys can relate to this. We have a private Cyberpunk game that's been going on for like a year and a half now. And one of the players in that game, I try to make sure that everybody has a piece in the overall story, and it kind of rotates through so that every character basically gets that opportunity to be the center of the story. I have one player whose character this guy is sitting on like hours and hours of really juicy information. And the character never shares any of it. None of it. It's
Yep.
entire storylines that have been created for the group. And, it comes to this character.
The pivotal piece.
Right. All he has to do is say, hey, what about this? And nothing. It's like, oh my God, dude,
and
really?
He's a friend of ours, and he means well. Honestly, I think more than half the time he forgets he even has it.
Yeah, he just has, it's like a folder full of all this like
Yeah.
critical info. It's like just for later,
Yeah, that shit's, it's sitting under a pile of other folders, probably with coffee stains on it. Completely forgot it exists.
But I mean that's just one of the examples. Like sometimes, I mean, as a GM, you never know what your players are gonna do. So there are those moments where you just got to figure out, like, okay, that didn't work out as planned. How do I get back on track? Essentially, it's a challenge, definitely. But
it's always good when you have a co-GM.
Yeah, that does help. But I mean, that's one of the powers of the TTRPG format, where, yeah, like the choices players can make can alter things very widely. Of course, depending on how much the GM lets those choices alter things. It's the cause and effect are on two sides. Like the player represents the cause. They do the thing, but it's the GM who gets to decide how much an effect that cause has. So both have to kind of work together in order to create the meaningful choices required for the narrative.
Yeah, and that's in the TTRPG side versus video game. I mean, I think every GM goes through that piece where they create a storyline, an overarching story they probably have, for a campaign, they probably have a longer storyline that's there with some greater goals and things that can be achieved, bad guys, whatever it happens to be. And then they have the smaller items, which are the, per episode or per game session. And yeah, the way I always try to do it is everything is a large frame, and not try to, there's key NPCs and things like that I will create to put in there, but I'm very careful about not trying to completely, draw out what the story is going to be, to the point where I have specific things that I want to say or I'm going to say. because you're just asking for your players to go some other direction. And then you have to try and reel them back into the story. And I personally, I always find that to be the spot where things potentially, not always, sometimes that can be very interesting in and of itself, is reeling the people back in and getting them back heading in the direction that you originally intended. That can be a whole adventure on its own. But generally, if you open it up just enough that they can make those decisions, they can make those choices, and it's not just going to completely derail everything. That's what works best for me personally.
Yeah, I agree. You keep it kind of open in a way where it gives you as a DM options to rope in other players into kind of that narrative. It just alleviates the headache of having to toss out the whole thing in improv.
I think the question comes down to whose story are you telling? Because if it's the DM that, if you as the game master DM, whatever you want to call it, there's so many names for that, him, her, whatever, at this point. But if you're the one who is moderating the game, we'll put it that way, you're moderating the game. It's, the first thing you got to do is decide whose story are you telling, because if you sit down at the table with your players and you have a story to tell, then you better hope that they're all on the same page and they all want to go that direction, because otherwise that's what you're going to spend your time doing, is trying to redirect them and get them back on the same page as you are, or back on the story. The opposite way to work on that is, rather than you telling a story, you just create that framework and then tell their story. They're telling the story. And that's hard to achieve when it comes to video. Well, I would say at this point probably impossible to achieve when it comes to video games.
Yeah, I mean, and storytelling in a video game is definitely a very different beast than in TTRPG, because, again, as we've been saying, TTRPG, you can play it all by ear, create the story as you go. But in the video game,
more flexible.
Yeah, but in the video game, there are, again, the beginning, middle, and end of the story already exists from even before you pick up that controller. But it's so there's definitely some challenges on, like, with all of these things created, how do they make your decisions in the game matter? Like, how different do things turn out, and like what effect do your choices have? And so, yeah, that's definitely it's a challenge, and I think there are definitely many games that do it well. Like, one game I'm actually going to bring up, because this is a game that presented several, like, there are several key points in the game where you make some actually fairly tough decisions that there are times where I had to, like, put my controller down and think on for a bit before I actually made it. It's a game called Triangle Strategy, made by Square Enix. Fantastic game if you're a fan of, like, Final Fantasy Tactics and those style games. This is right up that kind of alley. But the way that game's story was structured out was that there were points where the story would diverge and then converge later on. So there'd be a point in the game where you would be faced with a choice, and then based on that choice, the storyline would diverge, and it would be pretty different sometimes. Like, there was one point in the game where you had to make a choice to give up one of your allies in order to pretty much save your domain, because you were kind of like the lord of a small domain. And so you have the choice of not giving up your friend, but your domain suffers a lot of damage because of the fight that ensues, or give up your friend and then you go without him for like a good part of the story. And then later, to prevent things from like that scope creep where we talk about, where things diverge too much, they have a conversion point where those different storylines come back together, and then soon after that, they create another diversion point. And so that's one way that I've noticed that some games will try to keep these branching story paths. Like, they can have these branching story paths without the scope creep by creating those converging points.
Yeah.
So you can still have like different playthroughs that differ very wildly, just with the few key points that are similar.
Well, I mean, you see that in Baldur's Gate 3. I mean, one of the newer games out there. And I haven't finished it yet, but early on when it was coming out, I kind of looked at some folks who had like early access and what have you, or like early access to like the game. Most of those guys were like content creators and whatnot. And then some articles on the game itself, and I mean, I think this said it's like over 1,000 different endings, or something like that, depending on your choice. Now, I'm sure most of those endings are slightly different depending on your choice. But I mean, just the amount of alternate story packed in there. I mean, you can go in there, for those of you who don't know, I'm sure most people know by now though, so spoiler, you can kill all the origin characters. You don't have to take a single one of them with you.
My God.
Say it's not so.
Yeah, you can, and here's the thing: they've accounted for the murder hobos. They're like, there's gonna be people out there who are just gonna kill everybody. So let's make sure we got some in there for that.
So what you're telling me is my strategy is no good anymore. Got it.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting to see how any studio, whether it's Larian Studios or anyone, they adjust to that narrative, and they keep things kind of open and adjustable, even within the video games. I think it's gotten a lot better over the years, less railroady. And I will say this is going to be another controversial thing I'm going to say today. In games like Baldur's Gate 3, Dragon Age, Mass Effect, these games like that where your choices, and here's the thing, we're talking about choices that actually have impact. That if you go left, you're going to see what left looks like. If you go right, you're going to see what right looks like. In those type of games, I would be open to AI being used for them. I'd be I'd be open to that only because, and if it, and I'm going to use the term, I'm going to say this loosely, if it was done right, because we don't know what that looks like at this point in time. If AI was used to basically as a pseudo GM to a point, because it would be able to adjust for those wacky outliers that we see at the game at the gaming table. And I think that is where you see the distinct difference in narrative impact from a video game to a TTRPG, where a video game is constrained by the scope that you're able to tell those stories. Because, I mean, at a certain point, any studio, no matter how large, no matter how much money, like you can't just go infinite into the into the ether with the choices that you can make, or accounting for every possibility. Whereas a GM at a table, in a way, can, if they're good enough. They can adjust, they can improv basically. And I think that's what I'm getting at, where if used properly, AI could potentially improv in your game.
I'm
Maybe.
hesitant about that idea. Because I don't think AI even is there, and even when
I don't think it's possible.
Point,
yeah,
and even if it does get to a point, AI has that kind of nature about it to where AI, at least in its current implementation, does not technically ever create anything new. They take reference from old things,
Hmm.
and so they're very prone to particular patterns.
Oh yeah.
So I think, if one game does it, I'd say that'd be fairly unique. But if more games do it, you're gonna see those patterns reoccurring in those games.
I think the best that, this is just my personal opinion, I think the best that could be done with AI right now, and I could be completely wrong, but I think the best that could be done with AI right now would be to expand the NPC dialogue options. Because
Yeah. There's ChatGPT. Yeah, I think you're right.
well, dialogue is a huge stopgate because most all of even the games that have 1,000 different endings or whatever they're saying, the ones like Garrus is bringing up at 40 different endings, the vast majority of those endings, or if not all of them, are based on dialogue options. The dialogue options that you use and what sequence you use them in, things like that. And so one of the main constraints that I see, even in the really good video games, especially if they're open world concept, is that once you've gone to an NPC, a lot of times the first time is when you're going to get all the dialogue options, and after that you just get the repeat dialogue option. Yeah. I mean, sometimes, especially if they really did a bad job following up with it, you may get completely irrelevant shit that is going to tell you the same thing over again.
You're like, what the fuck?
Right.
But here's my question, because we go with the idea that we could introduce AI to create new branching story paths, but because there's so much possible, the AI could, depending on how it's built, go almost anywhere. How much depth can you expect in any of these story paths? Because this seems where there's so much possible, and especially if it's built on AI, which sometimes isn't very good at memorizing details, to where I feel like we'd end up with essentially an ocean with the depth of a puddle if we go that route.
No, that is true. At least as it stands now. And to be clear, AI, at least what we consider AI, is not really AI.
Well,
it doesn't. It's AI light. At least that's how I'm going to put it, because it doesn't. Again, Matt pointed out, it doesn't inherently think for itself. At least that's what we consider as artificial intelligence, something that is aware, that can think for itself, like you or I. Right now, AI as we know it still exists within a particular box that it operates within, and it only knows that box.
Well, you look at some of the games that are out there right now that have used a limited form. I'm going to say a limited form. It's more of an algorithm than it is. I mean, that's what AIs are right now anyway, is algorithms. But, I'm going to use the example of Fallout 4. Because, anybody who's played Fallout 4 for any length of time is probably really sick of listening to the guy say, I've got another thing.
Needs your help.
Another settlement needs your help.
Yo.
Shut up, Preston Harvey.
Yo.
Be quiet. Get out of my head.
And if you follow that long enough, you will see that there's only, I think there's only like 30 or so different missions that are actually in that queue. And then but the AI will put them in different places. So you basically, essentially you end up doing the same thing, just in different places, or in the same place over and over again. I've ran into that as well. But
so you're talking about like procedural generation, essentially.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And yeah, there are plenty of games that do implement procedural generation for sometimes repeating quests or even map generation. And I think you see that a lot in especially like roguelite games, where the purpose is that you play the game, you die, you get your meta progression, and then you go back in, and things will be different. It creates a good breadth of content, but I wouldn't say it generates things with genuine depth. And also, procedural generation also isn't a way to progress a story, really. It's usually meant. I mean, the way it's used in like Fallout 4 is essentially, you already did the story. This is just some extra stuff to do, just cause some time wasters. Here you go, have it. So even with procedural generation, I mean, if we're going to talk about it in a story sense, I don't know if it has anywhere to do when it comes to creating the stories of games.
Yep, that is true.
I think if they were truly going to do, I don't know, when it comes to introducing AI like in a chat GPT type format into video games at this point, I'm not sure how they could do it if they didn't open up the dialogue options. I mean, I just don't think you can really do it with limited dialogue options. Like I said, I would say that's the main stopgate. That's the main control points right there in the game right now, in games right now, is the dialogue options. And that's how you make your choices. And even in a lot of these games, even if you kill like main characters, it doesn't necessarily stop the storyline. You just continue on without whatever was attached to that particular character. I've seen quite a few games where they've had to do updates where you have a main character that isn't, invulnerable, that gets killed off, and then basically you can't get past a certain point in the game. You're just stuck. I don't think that happens often anymore, but it used to happen.
No. Yeah,
a lot.
I think games have accounted for that. They're like, we've seen this happen in way too many other iterations in different games where some of these players just do some wacky ass shit. We need to make it so that they can still progress.
Wow. Oh, okay. So, Old Man Garrus, question is, can an AI bot running a model replace a DM? And Garrus's answer is yes. That's been done repeatedly and has been successful. But what's lacking is the human emphasis on the emotions that make the session or game as exciting as it is. Maps, encounters, monsters, overall story, all can be done easily. The inflection by the DM on the actions and the actions and reactions, I can't read tonight, makes it exciting. But I agree with that. You had me confused for a moment there with the AI model replacing a DM piece. I think that's arguable. I'm not, maybe I'm just not really understanding what you're saying with that, but as read through it, I follow you.
Yeah, like I think the AIs definitely can create an adventure, a very basic story of, like they can tell you like, oh, there's, essentially the Mario story. There's princess in a castle, gotta go save her, kind of basic stuff like that. But if you want to talk about like I don't want to say a real story because technically any story is a real story. I'm talking about like a good, well-crafted story that has like solid theming and emotion in it.
Like Mario Brothers.
I don't think would be able to expect.
I mean, come on, bro. He was out there saving his love.
Yeah. I don't think we can expect that kind of story from procedural generation or AI. So and that's one of the things that become very difficult to keep intact when we create too many narrative decisions that wildly change things.
Mhm.
because when things change too much, it can be very difficult to keep the overall like theme of the story intact. Because when anything is possible, then you can completely go off course and any theming the story might have had otherwise it gets completely lost. While keeping it a little more concentrated to if smaller but key decisions, you can still craft the story in a way that each path you go on still has the main theme of the story intact.
Yeah. And I agree with Oman Garris. AI, honestly, I think AI can be used to build the foundation of what could be a good story. Um, and then from there, you have to add the human element. You have to add the ability, like Killer Teacup says here. How well does AI improvise or deal with open world sort of groups? Yeah, you have to. I think that's kind of where AI will falter is when the players inevitably go off script. Let's see. So old man Garrus responded with, I just typed this into chat GPT, very generic. This prompt is based on the Forgotten Realms world in D&D. Was giving me a synopsis of an overall story for a group of 4 players, starting at level 1 and ending with them at level 15. It just gave me 9 paragraphs of details across 4 acts. And yeah, that's what I mean, Garrus, where okay, let's see right here. So for example, Act 3, Reckoning of the Sundered, levels 9 to 12. As the party's power grows, they must make a final choice. Prevent the Sundered Realm's return or harness its power to confront a far greater threat, the looming abyssal entity known as the Shadow Fiend. To make this choice, they seek guidance from ancient sages, commune with the spirit of a forgotten hero, and delve deep into realms to uncover forgotten lore.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's saying that there isn't potential in the AI. The thing with the AI, though, and maybe maybe there's a bit of ignorance on my part when it comes to the AI piece, because I limitedly use AI, and I have not been overly adoptive of Chat GPT or any of that stuff. I still believe that old-fashioned storytelling is the way to go. I don't want a machine creating the story for me. I want it to come from a person or from my own mind. So that's, it's something that we're being creative and we're making instead of relying on the machine to do it. Now, how does that relate to games and what the AI can bring to the table as far as games go? Yeah, kind of going off of what Killer Teacup is saying, there's a lot of stress and pressure for your GMs, your DMs that are out there and making sure that you're creating story.
Something cohesive and quality for your players.
Yeah. But again, I think it really comes down to, my advice to anybody who is doing this is stop trying to tell the story. You're the moderator of the game. You're running the game. Stop trying to tell the story.
Also, gym advice, your players will tell it for you.
Exactly. Let the players tell the story. You're just there for the framework. That's your role in the whole thing. And to add in the fluff, add in the NPCs so that you can, add some spice and flavor when it's needed, or to help them be able to move their story forward by adding in the key characters. Theater of the mind is exactly what it's all about. But I mean, theater of the mind can be also played in conjunction with maps and all those things. It doesn't necessarily have to be completely, without
ephemeral.
Exactly. There you go. Thanks for the words, man.
I got
you can do a fantastic job and lighten your workload without having to go and have something like Chat GPT or whatever, an AI, put a whole story together for you. I mean, I'm not saying that you don't. I'm not saying don't do that. That's what you want to do. Go for it. Do it. But it really comes down to, best practice for me is just create a framework. I just create a framework, and I talk to the players generally beforehand about that framework, and then let them loose. Go for it. Tell the story.
Yeah, exactly. Killer Chica. You add the spice and the elements, but you don't drive the train. Yeah, and here's the thing that, like, obviously this is mine and Greg's, because Greg and I agree on that. Like, as a GM or DM, whatever you want to call it, you're there to arbitrate the rules, and to provide the foundation for the story and / world that your players inhabit. After all of that's said and done, your players tell the story. Pretty much it. Even like, so for our private group, I DM the D&D 5th edition campaign, Dungeon of the Mad Mage, and for those of you who know of that particular campaign, there is a ton in there. The players just I've given them the rope, and they're running with it. Our artificer just had an incident this past Saturday, thanks to our ogre cook who Matt plays. Yeah, that was. Let's just say it was an exorcist moment.
Long story short, he decided we fought some intellect devourers. My character thought, wonder if I can cook these. And let's just say it did not go well for one particular character.
Yeah. So
and,
if you ever meet a character named Drumsy, don't eat his food.
No, he's a fantastic chef. I think whatever happened to the artificer was something else entirely. You can't prove that it was the fried
issue.
All I can say about that whole thing is, when all else fails and you feel like the story is kind of flat at the moment, throw in wild magic, solves all your problems.
Honestly, I really that made me I had a great time. Just here, go roll on this chart and see what fuckery happens.
Guaranteed to have a good time.
Yep.
So we got way off track with that.
I mean, that's
a little bit.
Kind of, it's all in keeping with.
A player decision.
There you go.
A player decision altered the course of that story for that particular session we had, which was Drumsy's decision, or my decision, to have Drumsy take pieces of intellect devourers and think, I'm gonna fry these up into fried brain fritters. Dish courtesy of Cuban cuisine. It exists. And he did just that, and then that led to the artificer having a bad trip, to put it lightly, and now he is blue. He has turned blue and will be that way for a very long time, likely.
I think our artificer has been like the key character in the last 2 sessions. Because obviously last session, I mean, that was just a wild show. And then the session before that, he, we ended up we're trying to get some information from a dwarf, feisty old dwarf, and we're softly trying to intimidate this guy, sort of. Not, we're just trying to get the information. And so our paladin, I believe it is, casts Zone of Truth. And then the guy, the dwarf, asks if we're trying to intimidate him. And, everybody else that's at the counter is like, oh, no. And then the one person that fails his role is the artificer, who turns around and tells the guy, yeah, we are trying to intimidate you.
Yeah, Zone of Truth can definitely
or trying to threaten you
sometimes. But yeah, again, that's the whole thing with TTRPGs in general, where they are very much driven by the player choices, and player choices will help form the narrative and how things progress. Of course, that again is dependent on the DM rolling with it or
Mhm.
railroading it so
stakes.
hard that the
Yeah.
reaction does not match the action itself.
Yeah, and again, every DM has their style. Just
Yeah.
like every game designer has their style. Um, and I honestly I think that is the limiting factor in gaming, video games as opposed to TTRPGs. Um, and and when I say limiting factor, I don't mean that as a negative. There are going to be limitations as of right now for video games in terms of, I wouldn't say the storytelling impact necessarily, but the storytelling scope. At a D&D game, you can go as wide and as deep as you want. Within a video game, you can only go so wide and so deep as the game itself allows, and that's for various reasons. But I think, actually, I don't think I know for a fact that game designers have been, when it comes to video games, have done a phenomenal job of taking the limitations, and again I use that term loosely here because it's really not super limiting, um, to tell compelling stories. And you see it in very simple games like this War Among Us, I think it's called.
Among
Let me
Us,
look it up.
War
Not
Among
Among
Us.
Us.
What?
This War of Mine. There we go.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that game. Okay,
There's like simple games like that, and the reason why I say that's a simple game because it's when you look at, compare that to something like Baldur's Gate 3, super simple game, but super impactful decision making, and that leads to very compelling storytelling. For those you haven't played, this War of Mine, absolutely fantastic story. Um,
a heavy
if-
one,
yeah,
very
yeah.
very heavy.
I would only play it if you're okay with being a little depresso afterwards.
Yeah, it's
Because
one of those games that really pushes the idea of what a story in a game can be,
Mhm.
and it pretty much focused on, and Robbie, you can correct me if I get a few details wrong, but essentially trying to survive, like the people trying
Yeah,
to survive during war times.
pretty much. Yeah, it's the
Essentially, like,
civilians, but essentially trying to keep their heads above water and make it to see, tomorrow in a war zone, essentially. If I
yeah,
remember correctly, it's been a little while since I've played it.
yeah. So
Which
it's definitely a very heavy story. It's not.
yeah,
It's a very bleak outlook, and
mhm.
I honestly I do appreciate the games like that push those boundaries of the types of stories being told in video games.
Yeah. And again, that's
they
that is
they
testament to his skill.
well, and they provoke emotion.
Yeah,
That's one thing that is kind of a it's one thing I really like in some video games is that they actually provoke an emotional response. To me, that's a pretty good game, even if the rest of the game is crap. I mean, if it at least has story enough there to provoke an emotional response where it really makes you sit back and say, okay, wow, but then if you can
and honestly, I think that's what you can say is a good narratively driven game when they provoke that emotion.
Oh yeah, I love a game that can get me into the feels.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
Well, and games like that are a relatively new addition to the industry. I mean, because if you go back, look at if you go back in the video game industry, let's just say 30 years. All right, you're looking at the popular games of the time were things like Mortal Kombat, which I mean, there was a quote unquote story. but I think the story was developed for the game because the game itself had no real story. You're just, got these characters and right.
I mean, story's never been the focus of the Mortal Kombat series. It's
At least
the
not
story's
early
always
on.
it's just been the story of the Mortal Kombat series is always just there to serve as a basic framework for
why you're
why
fighting.
these people are fighting. But the focus is obviously on look at these guys fight and oh my god, he just pulled his spine out from his asshole. That's
I mean, and yeah, I agree with you, Greg, to that degree. Where early on in the gaming industry, a lot of the games were simple. I think one of the first truly impactful and narratively driven stories was Deus Ex, and I think it was 2003 when that first came out. When Deus Ex came out,
I'm not
Let me
sure.
look that up. I'm gonna Google that real quick because I can't remember. I know it was early.
See, the thing with me is that I don't know. I don't want to say that like
Yeah, it was 2000. So I was off by 3 years.
okay. See, I don't know if I can quite agree that because it almost sounds like as if we're trying to say that good stories didn't exist in gaming until recently, or maybe
Mario Brothers. Come on. I didn't say that.
I mean, like
joking.
I mean, like, yeah,
Brought
there
a tear to his eye.
definitely was a time when, because of the technological limitations of games, there couldn't be that much of a story, at least not much in depth. Like, there's a time where, just getting text into his game was difficult, getting voice lines into a game was very difficult, and as those technologies made those easier, they could expand the type of stories that were being told.
There absolutely was a time when Zelda was deep story. I mean, I really, because when you transitioned from, Atari and Frogger, Mars Attacks or Asteroid, to the first Nintendo and Legend of Zelda. I mean, suddenly you have suddenly you have a story that's more than, jump fast or go splat, so.
And so storytelling definitely obviously has come a long way then, as again the technologies continue to advance, we have started to see the branching story paths where where the player can make narrative decisions that can impact the end of the story. And I'm trying to think, because you brought up Deus Ex, and I think Deus Ex is one of the early examples of that. I think honestly, even before that, like way back in the day, you had those choose your own
adventure games. Yes,
those text adventures.
The Oregon Trail.
Those are those are the OGs. But obviously, they were just text, and they didn't have the gameplay that we know now. With branching story paths.
But they did have. I mean, honestly, though, those games do kind of fit into what Garrus was saying earlier with having the optional endings piece to it. But definitely. It was all based on dialogue options. The entire thing.
Yeah, and that's been the issue. That was the issue for a long time, because you either had a purely text-based adventure, or you have something else with a very basic story, sometimes told in the game manual.
I got to throw one game out there that I think might have been Atari's attempt at telling story in their games. Pitfall. I don't know if you guys remember that game.
That one might be before my time.
That rings a bell, and I can't. I've probably played it, but I can't remember it off the top of my head.
It was kind of I think a lot of the way that was Indiana Jones Simulator. Yeah, that's Pitfall basically was that. I mean, it was kind of an Indiana Jones style thing where you're, running through, swinging across quicksand, avoiding alligators and all this other stuff. But I think that was probably about as close as they got, unless there's some other games. Atari had a lot of games, but I think that's about as close as they got to actually trying to tell a story in their games, because, otherwise it really wasn't.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, Matt, you bring back memories mentioning the Choose Your Own Adventure, because I remember the Choose Your Own Adventure, like Goosebumps books and like a couple other different books I used to read as a kid. There was one, I believe the title is called Lone Wolf or something like that. It was like 24, 25 books, I think is all. There might be more. Basically, it was like the Choose Your Own Adventure books. If you go do this thing, you pull the sword from the stone, flip the page, yada yada. Honestly, and I think that those probably were the early inspirations for things like Deus Ex. And the thing with telling compelling narratives is, aside from seeing the effects of your choice, the choices do have to be cohesive. Meaning they do have to make sense. They themselves, while giving player agency, should follow a linear path.
Or keeping to the themes of the overall story. Like I'm going to bring up that game Triangle Strategy again, because it's the choices that you make throughout that game are the whole thing with the game is 3 differing ideologies. And this is very much baked into the mechanics as well. You have morality, which is decisions you make that are based on honor, things that are just, essentially trying to be the goodest boy. You have liberty. Liberty was about being like forthright, free-spirited,
goodest boy.
and it's a general thing about almost self-interest at times, but being the forthright one and being a little more aggressive sometimes. And then there's utility. It was about logical, self-preserving choices. Sometimes it's about the greater good over the self sometimes. And within that story,
there was no chaos in there?
No. Within that story, there are 3 different nations where each of them embodied one of these core themes. And every time you're faced with a choice, it's usually an A or B choice, but one of those choices is in line with one of those 3 themes. And so, essentially what you end up getting out of the story that the game tells is that sometimes you end up on a path that's very much in line with one of those 3 key themes. And very much that is how the game ends, with you following one of those themes to the end, and that very much changes, the scope of, or the ending based on what you decide to do. But that's what I mean. Like, it's diverging story paths based around key themes to it, and they don't have like a million different endings. But each of the endings they do have are very concise to what the game is about. I think when you add in a bunch of different things, it can be a little difficult to try to keep those core themes intact. It can be done, I'm sure. But I think it becomes a little difficult for each of them to have that same level of impact.
So... Yeah. On what you just added onto that question there, there are some more recent games that really, are narrative heavy, that really do kind of draw you into the story piece. Even though we can knock on it now, but one of the games of its day that's still a very, very popular game, Skyrim. That, it was a narrative-based game. Well, is, I should say. And it definitely told not just one story, but several storylines as you went through one overarching story. But I think there were parallel stories that were just as important. Instead of just minor side quests all the time with one main story, you had the main story, but then there were a lot of other main stories, I guess you could say.
I mean, when it comes to Skyrim, I would say there were two main stories. On one hand, you have the Civil War, and on the other are the dragons. I'd say those are the two main stories of Skyrim.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say because like the one with the dragons is always going to end as it does. I don't think there's much choice for that one, but when it comes to the Civil War, you can make that choice where like you pick your side, and the end of that pretty much picks the future of the country of Skyrim. But then you have like a bunch of different side storylines of different scale. Of course, you have like the companions, the Mages Guild. Those are like Thieves Guild, Dark Brotherhood. Those are probably the next step down from the main storylines to the biggest side story paths.
Yep.
Mm.
And a lot of those do have your choices. Like for the companions, whether you kind of embrace the werewolfness or decide to kind of free everyone from it, or the Dark Brotherhood, whether you kind of purge everything or kind of help them all survive. There's a lot of them do have. Mostly, I believe it's kind of like an A or B choice that affects the ending of each storyline.
Yeah, a lot of them have some pretty closed endings. I agree with that. Even in that game, they do. Most all the storylines in there have a pretty tight ending that's you can't really influence it a whole lot. One Killer Teacup brings up a really interesting point about the side quest piece, because I think you experience this in a lot of games, and I think I've experienced this a little bit with the original release of 2077, Cyberpunk 2077, where the side quests, even though they're not relevant to the overall story, really are the thing that gives you that feel of being real, that true immersion in the world, where you can have these side quests that allow you to experience the deeper, the deeper environment, like the culture, so to speak. Yeah. I agree 1000%, Teacup. I'm one of those players who does not, any game I play, I do not just run through the main storyline.
Yep.
I'm that guy who will usually do a little bit of the main storyline, but then I go out and explore and check out all the side quests. Yeah.
I'm usually over levels whenever I get back to it because I'm busy doing other shit. But the last part of your question there, Teacup, basically, they said, what they said, I don't know if it's you or not. Got distracted there. Brain.
Should they tie in?
Expecting side stories
expecting
to
the side quests to tie back into the main story.
I think so.
Basically, the question is, should they? Personally, no. I don't think every story should tie into the main story. I don't think that's necessary. I personally, what I think, good side quests will add to the world, not necessarily to the story to the main story being told. And the reason why I say that is because the main story being told in any game is an anomaly. You're part of something that 99% of all the other individuals in the world don't have a clue what's going on. I mean, look at Skyrim, look at Oblivion, look at the story of V in Cyberpunk 2077. Like those are unique situations. So to make it where the side quests that are there to ideally help flesh out the world, tie back into the story, to me make no sense. I think side quests, that is, unless the person involved in that quest is tied to the main story, then yeah, have a callback to the main story. Fine. But like if it's like a side quest, that story should be and those characters should be there to flesh out the world that your player is in.
Not right or wrong here with this, but there are multiple types of players out there, but I think really that the question asked there, when you first ask a person if they're familiar with a game, whether they played a game, let's say on Steam, I think you can tell which player is which by what the answer is most of the time, because you have those players that are going to tell you, oh yeah, I beat that. That's the guy who wants the side quests and everything to tie into the main story, because that's what that person's after. They're after, I beat that. And then you have the other person who may or may not quietly tell you, yeah, I've got 4,000 hours into that.
Check their Steam profile, like, oh my goodness, how do they even manage that time?
Yep.
And
hey, I've got like 8,000 hours in the ESO, so I'm good with that one.
Yeah, no life in it over here.
Yeah, here's what I'll say about the side stories and how they tie in with the main story. I guess it depends on how you define the tying in. A side story should not progress the main story. That's the whole reason it's a side story. What I do think it should do, though, is enhance the overall story. Whether that's, like, as you guys have said, help kind of flesh out the world. Sometimes it can help kind of showcase a different side of a certain character that you may not see otherwise in the main story.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it can help prepare the main character with maybe some sort of tool or knowledge that helps them in the main story. Like maybe you learn some side context about the main storyline that helps you kind of think about the main story in a different context with this new knowledge. So it doesn't directly impact things, or doesn't have to, but it does enhance it in some way. Like, if your side story has absolutely nothing new to explore in the world, the characters, and doesn't have anything to do with, well, anything in the main story, then that's a bit of a failure of a side story.
Okay.
In my opinion.
So now tell me this. You played 2077. We've all played 2077. The Mr. Stud side quest. Explain how that ties into anything.
Well, okay. I mean, we've talked about how it's a part of
Mr. Stud, Jim Wolfen.
It shows a part of the world that, like, not everything is like completely shit. You have places where AI ends up in some rather strange places, and there's room for a little bit of wackiness in this world, or in stuff like that. Like, it's...
Well, then is that a bad side quest? Because it doesn't tie into anything.
No,
but it helps flesh out the world.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. The quest doesn't tie into anything particular, but it does help add to the cyberpunk, to Night City, to the world that Mike Pondsmith built. I feel like, and here's the thing: those quests should absolutely be there. They don't necessarily have to tie into anything major, but again, if they're fulfilling some role, whether it be having callbacks to the main story or to a particular character, of the main story, or they're helping to flesh out the world or add context or showcase something of the world itself. Again, they're adding to. Um, I say, yeah, they need to be there because they're important pieces. Let's see. Grimwolfen said, so side quests are like MSG. Are you talking about Metal Gear Solid?
I think it's about like MSG for food. It's just like enhances.
Oh, MSG. Yo, don't knock MSG. All right, that shit's delicious. Put that all up in my Chinese food. And Old Man Gare said, would you be okay seeing a movie that has scenes with the main character that have nothing to do with the story or other related characters? The answer to that question from me, Grimwolfen, is no, only because, again, with the last sentence there, the last part of that question, excuse me, if you're going that route, you're not adding to either the world or the story, the main story itself, so you're not doing anything. My stipulation for those side quests English today, should be that they're either adding to the world, whether by context or just fleshing out a particular area or new cast of characters, or they're doing that and maybe calling back to a main story character or the main story itself in general. This is true. Yeah, I mean, a story is at its core just a visual representation of a role playing. It's like a live action role play adventure that we get to sit there and watch.
I feel special now because out of the roles that I have played on film, I'm apparently a really great bum. So
he is. He's fantastic. He did a really
my
good
life's
job as the
ambition.
homeless guy. I got to kill him.
I can kind of see it. Like rub a bit of dirt on your face, let some stubble grow out. I think
that's literally exactly what happened, actually.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that image comes together very well. Granted, I probably don't need a whole lot of work to make myself look like a bum.
No.
I'm halfway there
already. You just need to mess your hair up a little bit. Your hair's a little too nice.
Yeah, it's mess up my hair a little bit, and I'm pretty much there. Yeah. But I guess going back to when it comes to decisions within the story, because I think we went on a bit of a tangent. Our classic tangents about a side
quests. We're not even going to call them tangents anymore. They're side quests.
Yeah, our side quest about side quests.
Now we just got to work on keeping them relevant, right?
I mean, it's in story. It's
entertaining.
Somewhat the same wheelhouse. But yeah, when it comes to choices, and I know this is going to be something that I think you, Rob, are going to disagree with a little bit, but I don't think every game story needs to have like branching story paths or these different narrative decisions to be made, because I think there are plenty of games that are good that have a linear story.
I just want to point out that Matt's branching out now because he's actually trying to find things that you're going to disagree with instead of just me.
Look, we gotta explore different things. It can't always be me, you and me butting heads, Greg.
we gotta gang up on Rob sometime, right?
Matt the contrarian, yeah, yeah, he is.
He the contrarian.
Yeah, like side quests. Yeah, that's what we're gonna call them for now on, side quests.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I'm honestly glad to have lived in the time that I have, and I'm not trying to get philosophical on you. And the reason why I say that is because like Greg and Matt, we've gotten to see the progression of the storytelling process. I think in media in general, but for us particularly in games, we've got to see the progression and the evolution of the storytelling process and the complexity and added depth that has come with time, with the advancement of technology, and with the advancement in fine tuning of those storytelling skills. Because storytelling is an art form. No matter the medium you're using, it is an art form. It is something that you have to work at. And I say that because I am terrible at telling stories. Not good at them. At least I think so. So it's what was that?
No comment, Greg.
No comment.
They all agree with me. It's like, yeah, just fuck, dude.
No, I mean,
again, this is just my personal opinion.
Okay. So let me just clarify something here real quick, because we've been basically working together for, I don't know what, 3 years, 4 years, somewhere in there.
Something like that.
You and Matt more than I was an extreme part timer in the early time. I had a barely an opinion at some things, but so you've been doing this essentially, and even before that, working with like Kingdom Death Monster. Yep. So you've been creating story, and this whole time you've sucked at it, apparently.
just my personal opinion.
Wow.
And I think that's me kind of potentially holding.
Rob,
myself.
just keep sucking at it, all right, man.
All right,
just keep doing what you're doing.
Here's what I'll say. I think you're very good at doing like what we've been talking about in the case of like running a story as a DM, where you create the framework for the players to tell the story. Because you were able to run with Jumsy cooking up that intellect devour, and then having all that stuff go down our artificer. Like, that story happened because essentially you let it happen. You weren't the type of DM that just said, no, we're gonna stay on track. Like, no, you let that shit happen. You let us tell that story, and I think that's
because that's my approach. And, and again, not everyone, and again, that approach can be right or wrong depending on who you ask, and not everyone's going to have the same approach. But like Greg, I firmly believe, and I think like a lot of people actually, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think most folks at the table, GMs and players alike, will agree that the story is a collaborative effort. Or rather, should be.
It should be.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
That's definitely my stance on it.
If it's not, then there's something wrong at the table.
Yes, in one way, shape, or form.
Well, wrong. Here's the thing with that. I've played with a lot of different GMs. All the way back to college days, and even before that. I've played with a lot of different GMs, even GMs at cons. A lot of GMs, they want to tell the story. That's their approach to it. They want to tell the story. And I'm not, good, bad, I don't know. But I've always liked the approach of letting the players tell a story. Mm-hmm. It's their story. That's the thing. It's their story. And as long as they own the story in that fashion, they're going to want to keep playing. That's how you get people into a long-term campaign. And why have we been able to have personal games that have ran for, year and a half, 2 years now? Yeah. Most of the time, you get a group together and you play 3-4 sessions, and then people start falling off, wandering off, whatever. Couple months down the line, it's like, hey, you want to try this other game? I've experienced that so much. You get into a story, and then suddenly it's, hey, let's go play Car Wars or whatever. Yep. But we've been able to keep these stories going for and engaging for a very long time. And personally, I attribute it to the approach. That's what I think the difference is the approach. It's not you or me or Matt who's just has a group of players there so that we can tell our story. You get the group of players together so that you can help, you can set up a framework and let them tell the story. They tell it. People like that. That's what they want. I mean, you think about it from the very beginning, no matter what game you're creating a character for, what are the things that you're going to think of first? One of the things you're going to think of first is probably somewhere in the realm of the min-max thing, which that's just become commonplace. Okay, fine. Yeah. You want to have the best possible character that you can have. The second thing is going to be, what is the backstory? Why is this person the way I want to play them? And generally what happens, even people that are shallow at the beginning when it comes to, I'm not saying that as a negative way, but I mean, shallow with the backstory in the beginning. So when they first start getting into RP, they may not be really into creating that backstory, in part because they're just kind of getting their feet wet. They're just really figuring out, well, what is this whole storytelling thing? But then once you get into it, once you played for a little bit, suddenly that becomes vastly important. I am creating this character that I'm going to play. So I now want to have a vision of what this person is like. And the easiest way for me to do that is to go back and create a life path, create a story behind them so that I can get to where I'm at now. And then that's why I am the way I am. I do the things that I do.
Yep. No, I agree with you. And I honestly think video games are catching up to that kind of approach, meaning they're setting, especially in these narratively driven games, the designers are starting to set the story, set the foundation, making sure that the decisions actually have consequences, both positive and negative, that they make sense in the progression of the story. When you go to the first act, second and third act, that you can look back and see, like you can kind of, like any one of us would look back to a particular instance, a memory or something. They're building those things in, but at the end of the day, they're doing as much as they can to allow the player character, or rather the players, to tell the story. And I'm excited to see where they go from here, to be honest. Because the more the technology advances, and like I said, I mentioned AI, even though I know a lot of people are kind of like, ugh. But I think, especially with the way old man Garris put it, AI could have a positive impact on the storytelling process if used properly. And at least in my opinion and my understanding of it now, in helping to build that framework. Where it helps you set that foundation for you to allow your player character to progress the story that they want to see in the world that you're building. I think it has the potential to be a really good tool to kind of level out the railroady feel of some video games. I mean, even the best laid ones like Baldur's Gate 3 or 2077 or any of those games, like at the end of the day, you're still going to a particular ending. Like you like whatever you do in the game world, at the end of the day, you're still going to that particular ending. Doesn't matter. Whereas
whether it's ending A or ending B or ending C.
Yeah, you're still going to that thing. Whereas in at the table, I mean, to use a term, the sky's the limit. You can completely go to an entirely different ending than what the story even calls for, depending on what's done by the player characters. So I'm excited to see that on both sides, because I'm sure AI will be used even development of TTRPGs, and I'm open to it. I do believe that some of the first iterations. I mean, we've seen it. We've already seen it. Some of the first iterations are going to be complete ass. I mean, just look at Glory Hole. Glory of the Giants. I always call it Glory Hole of the Giants.
That's the popular
Popular term
nickname
for
for it that a lot of people have given that
Yep.
particular D&D supplement.
Rob, do you mind getting a little bit of maintenance stuff out of the way here quick, and then we can break back into this? For the normally show is 90 minutes long. We tend to go over, so I just wanted to kind of get this in there for the folks that may or may not have time to stay with us. Take it away, man.
All right, so we actually have a really, really big announcement. If you're part of the Discord, you've already heard it, but if you're not, so for those of you who don't know, we've been working with R. Talsurian Games, creators of the Cyberpunk universe, for a bit now, and we are actually going to be having Cody Pondsmith, son of the legendary Mike Pondsmith, on the update log next Wednesday. Or is it next Wednesday?
Yep, next Wednesday. The first.
It is next Wednesday. Wow, the first is creeping up real quick. But yeah, next Wednesday, the 1st of November, to talk about himself, to talk about the work that he's done. He is actually the lead designer and creator of the Witcher TTRPG out of R. Talsurian, and a number of DLCs for Cyberpunk Red, and I'm pretty sure. And again, don't quote me on this. I'm sure Cody will probably elaborate on it. But I'm pretty sure he's lead on the 2077 version of Cyberpunk, right?
Yep, the one that's coming up. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, he's got a lot going on, and we'll hopefully and more than probably be talking into that when we sit down and talk to him on the first.
I should correct that. I am not absolutely sure if he is the lead on that. Right. But the reason I want to correct that is because I know he has the Blue Moon game that is coming. They've already had a couple sneak peeks released, so there's a brand new game system that he's been working on.
Oh, nice. Okay, I'm going to have to look at that one then. Definitely have to look at that. The
update.
No, go ahead.
The update for Cyberpunk Red is supposed to be released definitely before Gen Con next year. I'm gonna have to. I don't want to say any more about that.
Obviously it's coming. We don't know when it's coming, but it's on the way. But yeah, so for those of you who don't know, Cody Pondsmith will be here with us the 1st of November on the update log to talk about R. Talsurian himself, and what it's like designing some well-known games. And working with his dad and all that jazz. I'm sure it's a dope process. I've watched a couple of interviews with Mike Pondsmith, and he seems like a dope guy. We will eventually be getting Mike on the show as his schedule allows, but that is also in the process.
If you want an opportunity to meet Cody in person, then get yourself to PAX Unplugged in Philadelphia if you are in that area. That'll be coming up early the first week of December. And Mike Ponce, the whole R. Talsurian team will be there. In addition to that, if you're up in the Wisconsin area around GaryCon time, which is March of 2024, then please do make it over to GaryCon. Check that out. You'll get to meet Mike Pondsmith. Will be there. I'm going to be there. Hopefully some of my other team members will be there, and we will have a R. Talsurian presence. So we will have some live games of Cyberpunk, which I'll be running, as well as some of the R. Talsurian people. Their new media manager, Rob Barefoot, will also be out there with us. So come and join us.
Yep. Now, Greg, anything you want to add before we continue on? relating to our other stream?
Next week we will be, we were going to do it tomorrow. We decided to bump it back a week. A lot of things going on, so we decided to bump it back a week. But next Thursday we will be having our episode 1 of our Alien stream, which I really encourage everybody here, check that out. We use our philosophies as far as how we run games. This system is really geared towards theater of the mind, and it really is the perfect opportunity to really show that picture. And I mean, it's Alien, and I kind of grew up on that from the horror genre, so kind of looking forward to the dark and gritty sense of that. Beyond that, we will be doing a test run of The Witcher. We don't have the date set on that yet, but we typically do that with any of the any game creators that are on our show. We make sure that we correlate that with at least one of the games that they've been working on. Cody has been working on a lot of games, but the last one that he really put out, I believe it was him and his mother, Lisa, that really did the bulk of the work on that one, but was The Witcher. And so we're going to focus a little bit on The Witcher, and we are going to do probably a couple different streams to kind of go over the system, character creation, and then an actual playtest. And out of each one of these games that we playtest, it really depends on what the reaction is to the game as to whether we put that into the lineup to actually run a campaign based on that system. The BOR, which is our cyberpunk game, we put on hold for a little while.
We had the season finale last Friday, so if you haven't checked it out.
Predominantly because we want to do some of the actual R. Talsorian content out of Tales of the Red. We want to get some of that stuff out there so the audience can kind of get a sneak peek at what is already generated and created for them. Obviously, it's going to have our spin on it. But we want to get that out there for folks, and then we will be probably rolling back into the BOR within, I would say, by the first of the year. That's about all I got for right now.
Yeah. So Matt, you have anything you want to add?
Not to this particular thing. I think you guys have kind of like settled that all that needs to be said.
All right, cool. But yeah, so to kind of reiterate what especially the piece about Gary Con, and potentially Gen Con, because I think we're gonna try to go to that as well. Hopefully with a bit of content of our own. As you guys know, we are developing our own game, so hopefully by then we've got a bit of a prototype to bring to you guys to kind of showcase. But yeah, again, myself and more likely Matt as well will be running some games for GaryCon. I know we're both looking at The Witcher right now, and maybe some else. We'll see. We'll keep you guys posted on that. But if you do want to keep up to date on a lot of things, do join our Discord link in the chat. That's again where we'll have where we have a lot of our updates for things regarding to the update log and our other stream that doesn't necessarily have a name. It's typically based off of the game that we're playing at the time. But that's also where you get to chat with us directly and any of the folks from, well, I think right now we have a couple of folks from the different studios that we're working with in our Discord.
We do.
Yeah, we have the media manager from R. Talsorian there. So, come, drop a question, chit chat, things like that.
We might have some sleepers too.
Yeah, we do have a couple of sleepers in there. Just kind of chill out. So yeah, that is episode 20. Wow, it's been 25 episodes. Also keep in mind, we are going to have I think right now it's tentatively a giveaway happening. We're still trying to decide that for our 100 followers, or reaching the milestone of 100 followers.
Here on Twitch.
Here on Twitch, yeah. So, yeah, keep your eyes peeled. We do have some changes coming down the pipe.
And no, you're not giving me away.
Oh,
What? Like, I don't know. I feel like someone could want a Greg around.
I mean, Greg is a great cook.
All right, let's change the subject
So, you
now,
know.
please.
But yeah, guys, that is episode 25 of the update log. Hopefully, you guys learned something. And hopefully, you guys had a good time. With that said, yeah, that's it for tonight, guys. You guys have a good night. We'll see you guys here next Wednesday when we sit down with Cody Pondsmith.
Absolutely. Let me look and see who we have to run into. Anybody in the audience got a suggestion as to who we can raid into?
Who we got around? Well, we got Gasumba. Yeah, why not?
Head over to Lord Gasumba? Okay.
Yeah.
We can do that. And all right. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Everybody have a good night.
See you guys next time.
Adios.